after we finish the session. And we're now preparing the live webinar on our YouTube channel. I'm going to leave a link to the YouTube channel in the poll or in the chat, actually, so that you can see how to find it later. So this is the link to our YouTube channel. And in the poll, we are live at this moment. So I think it's streaming right now. And in case you ever need to check this webinar again, you can do that. And right now, I'm just going to share the results of the poll. So it looks like most of the people are using Obsidian native graph view or InfraNodus. It's kind of like 50-50, but some use some other tools. If you can share with me which tools you're using, please let me know in the chat. And 70% of people are the subscribers of InfraNodus. So I'm just going to share the results of the poll right now so that you can see who voted what and what kind of audience we have. In the meanwhile, I'm going to share my screen so you can see the whole desktop. Like this, you have a really clear understanding of what my workflow is. So right now you should be seeing my screen. If you're not seeing it, let me know. Otherwise, we will get to it. So I'm just gonna be also checking the chat all the time. And in case you have any questions, let me know, and I will sometimes make stops and let you know the answers to your questions. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. You can find it in the control panel of Zoom. So I think you should have seen the results right now. As you can see, 70% of the people who are tuned in, they're InfraNodus subscribers. Around 30% are not. Some used to be, but are not anymore. I hope you will change after this webinar and join in again. And most of the people use Obsidian native graph view and InfraNodus. So, and only 10% use none. So we have an audience which is pretty much familiar with Obsidian and with the graph view. But in any case, just for the sake of the people who will be watching it on YouTube, I'm just going to introduce Obsidian and graph view anyway, so that those who don't know what it is can have a better understanding of how it works. All right, so let's get to it. First of all, I would like to share how I actually use Obsidian and what Obsidian is. In fact, Obsidian is a note-taking app, but the advantage of this app is that it allows you to connect notes using wiki links syntax. So the syntax looks like this. It's double brackets. So you can kind of create links. And then let's say if you want to later see what other notes a certain concept is connected to, you can click on that concept, and then you have the linked mention and also sometimes unlinked mentions where you can see what was actually the context where the node was used. So it's pretty good because it allows you to connect ideas together. And another advantage is that it works on your local file storage. So in the end, you own your own data, you always have access to them, and they're always on your hard drive. So that means you can port it easily between applications. You can use also other apps. For example, I like using it with Windsurf AI, which is a development tool for software development, but actually it works amazingly well for Obsidian Vaults. In fact, I kind of started using this instead of Obsidian. I'm going to make another video later on how I use this as well. But for now, we'll focus on Obsidian. And InfraNodus, which is a tool that I created, is a text analysis tool that visualizes ideas as a network. It shows you what are the main clusters of ideas. So they're usually indicated with the same color, how they relate to one another, and also what are the gaps between them. So you can always see kind of like the general visual overview of the ideas and how they're connected. So you can see them in context, which is very important. It's not just a tech cloud, but it's an interconnected entity you're looking at, which already kind of motivates you to think in terms of relationships. And you can see that, for example, in the context of this node, I'm using medium perturbations in the same context as electrical currents. You would never see it with just a standard text analysis. So it's kind of really well suited for the natural pattern recognition that we as humans have. We're very good in recognizing patterns, and this is why graphs are so good in visualizing information. And then most importantly, it shows you the gaps between different clusters that it identifies. So you can see, for example, that there is two clusters like here, light variability and language resonance, which are not connected. And usually it's going to be very unlikely topics. You know, what would be the connection between light variability and language resonance? Very strange, but this is exactly where the new ideas lie, because I was talking about this text in the context of this note. So I mentioned those ideas in the same context, but I didn't link them together. And this is what InfraNodus is very good for. It shows me what are the topical clusters that I talked about, but I didn't yet link in the context of a particular document. And then it proposes me to think of a connection between them. And then you have several layers of difficulty sort of that you can get into. So if you like to think for yourself, you would just look at the clusters. You can also click this button here that shows what are the concepts inside those clusters and kind of think a little bit what could be the connection between them. So there's one on the medium and electromagnetic radiation, and another one on listening devices and how it's connected to language, and how we can also think of a language as a sort of antenna. I was writing about antennas here, right? So then I can think, okay, what could be the connection between those two topics? If I know them well, it's going to be easier for me to think about them. If not, it's going to be more difficult, but the effort is really worth it, because usually you will have this kind of eureka moments when you come up with something that you haven't thought of before. So that's why it would be really interesting to think in this way. And you can then see in which context these two clusters or these two topics appear in the text. So you can click on the context here, and it's going to show you the two most sort of suitable statements for each topic. So you can then read more about it and think of a connection. Here I'm talking about an analogy of antennas and language, and how there is some sort of like if I write a text, it's like a device to also tune into a certain discourse and to attract people who are interested in the same discourse, right? Like any text or any sort of idea that we put out there can also be seen as a sort of antenna. So I'm kind of like remembering what I was thinking about here. And then it shows me another statement from where I was talking about variability of electric flow and how waves are used to propagate information. So then I can think, maybe how can I create waves in language and communication? So it can be a philosophical question or a technical question. And then eventually I can also go into the AI advice and generate a research question based on this gap. So it kind of takes the graph structure, the underlying graph structure, and the statements that it extracted, and then it uses AI to generate a research question, which I kind of like as a first step, because it still makes me think of the answer, and it's much better than just generating an idea, because I have to go the whole path myself. So how might the variability of electromagnetic wave propagation through space be analogous to the way listening devices attune to combinations of words and language? And what insights could this offer into designing adaptive communication systems? So that can be like a philosophical or a scientific question that I can then use. And eventually, if I like, I can send it to the internal chat, set it to go beyond this context if I want to kind of transcend the context of this node, or I can stay in the context. And then I send a question, and then it will use a built-in RAG system, which is a part of the InfraNodus Obsidian GraphView plugin, and generate an answer with the references to where it actually took the answer from. So that's kind of like a really basic workflow. You visualize the information, have an overview, reveal the main topics, maybe zoom into some specific concepts, and then think of the gaps and generate ideas for those gaps. And eventually I'm going to show you later in the webinar how you can integrate them into your writing. Now I'm just giving an overview of the main ideas. So that's how the InfraNodus GraphView works. And I also want to note that it's very different from the Obsidian GraphView, because Obsidian GraphView looks something like this. I will open it now. Like now I can see the whole vault. So it's pretty good as a pretty image to show me what is the kind of like my knowledge universe. You can also use the visualization to see that maybe some clusters are a bit disconnected, so you could connect them better. Like, for example, here, visualization practice and some article on personal management system. So I can kind of use the same approach as I use when I'm analyzing the InfraNodus graph, but this graph doesn't have any hints. It doesn't guide me through how I could actually play around with it. So people come up with all sorts of elaborate filtering systems where they can filter nodes by a certain tag or type and groups, and then it might become more useful, but still it's kind of hard to use, I find. And another thing is that when you visualize a specific node, for example, using this graph view, let me do this now. For some reason, it doesn't want to visualize the node. Maybe I will switch it to the Okay, it doesn't show me the local graph view, but basically what I wanted to say is that in the local graph view, it only visualizes the wiki links that you tagged. And that's a huge downside for me because sometimes I don't want to link them myself. I don't want to create all those links manually. Sometimes it's very useful because you kind of review the information and you make all those links, and then the graph that you will see is going to be the graph of those links. So let me show you the graph for antennas, the current text, for example. I will find it like this, I think. Antenna. Yeah, so you see here, the graph for antennas that's made with the native Obsidian graph view looks like this. I just see the main file and all the links that I created inside. But what does it give me? I mean, I can navigate using it maybe, but it doesn't really give me an idea of how those links are interconnected. The native Obsidian graph view doesn't show that. Whereas when I visualize this text inside InfraNodus, I have several advantages. First of all, it visualizes both wiki links that are marked here with the double brackets and also single concept. So I can kind of see everything and it's much more specific. Then another advantage, let me just come back to this page. And another advantage is that I can also use antenna. So I will come back to this file, visualize it again. Another advantage is that I can also see how those links are interconnected to one another. So if they're used in the same context, obviously there's a relation between them. For example, here antenna and dipole are connected. So that means that there's a link that I can explore here. And there's a cluster of ideas that, for example, medium, I'm using it in the same context as electromagnetic radiation and so on. Signal I'm using in the same context as the word coil. So I'm seeing much more information here. It's much more specific, and also it's organized into clusters that are shown here. So I get a lot more contextual information about my node, and I don't just see this kind of pretty graph of, just a star of ideas, but I'm actually seeing contextual information here, which is really, really useful. And I can also use InfraNodus to navigate through. So, for example, if I want to go to medium perturbation, like I would do here, I would click here and go to that page. But in the same way, I can also do it using the InfraNodus graph. So I can go here and then I click this arrow and then I appear on that page. So that would be kind of how you would use it as well. And the advantage here is that you actually have much more links that you can explore. So I can even go to the pages that don't exist yet, that like structure. And in fact, I can see what else structure is connected to. So I can see that it's connected to network, for instance, and then I can explore, okay, what is the connection between structure and network? I can click here, and then I see that there is some documents I have on network. So this is why it's kind of like really useful, because you can also navigate through the page, but you also have this contextual structural information about the page or the whole folder or the vault. So that's how it works. And these are some differences that InfraNodus graph view has from Obsidian. Of course, if you would like it to work like Obsidian, you can also go into settings and say that you just want to process wiki links only. And then it's going to only visualize connections between those wiki links. So you can see how these words connect to one another, how those pages connect to one another. But if you want a standard view, it's going to show you both wiki links and concepts. So that's the difference of it. If you have any questions, let me know. I will read now one that we received in the Q&A section. So there is a question from an anonymous user. Is the InfraNodus graph generated based on that particular node only, or can it be the entire folder? Yes, it can be entire folder. It can be search results. It can be tags. It can be bookmarks. I'm going to show you later what you can visualize. You can visualize virtually everything. So that's a huge advantage, actually, because no matter how you organize your nodes, you can actually visualize the content inside any sort of view. So yes, you can do it in many different ways. Let me now move on to talk a little bit about how I organize my nodes in Obsidian, because everyone has their way of doing it. And so I just wanted to share mine. Perhaps you will find it useful. I've been using Obsidian for a while, and I went through many different stages. For example, there's a radical way to use Obsidian where you just don't have any folders at all, and you just have like nodes, and then you connect them using those wiki links that we see here. And that's, of course, like how you could do that. That's possible, and as much as I'm into rhizomatic thinking and not making folders, I actually found that it kind of helps to make folders. And the main reason for me is because it allows me to have several vaults in one vault at the same time. I'm working on many different projects simultaneously. I have InfraNodus. I also have a movement practice. I have an art practice. I'm writing books. We also publish books. And I think everything is connected. But if it was all without any folder organization, it would just get lost. You know, there would be a mess. So I kind of like to combine the structure that folders provide, but also I rely on this interlinked nature of Obsidian and also using the InfraNodus Obsidian graph view that allows me to actually see how those nodes connect and to later consolidate them into entities. So that's why I kind of prefer to use it this way. And then, of course, you have a lot of other additional hacks that you can do, like adding tags or bookmarks, which I'm going to show later, which help you organize nodes in some kind of temporary aggregations of ideas, which you can then analyze and search through or visualize separately. So that's pretty useful and cool as well. And then once we also look at the structure that I have here, I want to also notice that the way that those folders are created, I actually like to think of it using time as the main organizing principle. So I have something that is incoming, which is kind of like some ideas I have on the moment. So each time I open Obsidian, maybe I don't have time or I don't want to look through all the folders to think where it should go. I'm just going to put it into the incoming folder here. It has this name, 0.incoming, so it's always at the top of the list because I organize them alphabetically. This makes it easier for me to find them. And then the rest are kind of different layers of temporality. So if it's something that is already like a formed project, I have a project folder, and here I have several projects. So if it's not just a node, but I know that, okay, it relates to InfraNodus, there's an idea that is related to it specifically, you know, I'm going to go into this folder, and there I have also incoming. So that's like when I don't know how to categorize it. This is something I'm thinking about in the moment. In progress, I use one, so it's right under the incoming one. And then I have different types. I'm thinking about the marketing for InfraNodus, methodology, user experience, and I have a little to-do list also, which I don't actually use that much in Obsidian, but it's kind of like what I should do with those nodes in Obsidian, actually. So it can be pretty useful. And then let's say if I think about the publishing house that we have, Circadian. So for example, now we're working on the conversation book and some ideas for that book as well. You know, so that's how it would work. These are for finished projects. And then I have something that I call research, where I'm posting stuff that I'm kind of working on. Maybe it's going to be new projects. Maybe it's just some thoughts. Maybe I'm going to write and publish it on my blog, Polysingularity, where I'm writing about different ideas I'm interested in. I'm going to also leave a link in the description below, so you kind of also see what all this sort of solidifies into, because it's also like a question how we're using Obsidian, right? And for me, I use it for writing, for the blog that I just posted the link to in the chat. We also have a publishing house where if something is concrete enough, it becomes a book, and you can find the books here on that website. Then, of course, I also have InfraNodus that I've been working on for the last at least 10 years. Then I have a blog about network science, Nodus Labs, and the movement practice here, 8OS. So you can see there's like many different projects, and all this goes into those projects eventually. So I really don't like to just kind of ruminate on a certain idea and not to see what it can be realized into. So instead, I kind of always like to turn my ideas into something actionable, whether it's going to be like a product feature for InfraNodus or a text that I want to write, or even, you know, in the worst case scenario, or it's even best case scenario, it's just like a nice module of thought that you have that you can use in conversations with your friends or that you can discuss further. So everything becomes very concrete. Now, let me just quickly look at the questions that you have. So we've been talking about the organization of nodes and temporality as the main criteria for folders, which I just explained. Incoming, then research as kind of like a little bit less short term, something I'm thinking about, and then projects as something really formed here, right? And then also, I didn't mention them, but I have also some kind of like when I'm exploring what to buy. So I have like a little shopping list. It's food additives, foods, laptops maybe, and then some tools. But that I kind of started recently, so it's not yet full. And also I have a Readwise folder with all the books, and you'll see how amazingly you can visualize all your excerpts from books using InfraNodus as well later. In fact, let me do something ambitious and try to visualize the whole folder. I hope it doesn't crash. Let's see, because it's quite a lot of information. Actually, yeah, it works. You see, so I can kind of like see what I'm also visualizing when I'm kind of using all these different books. By the way, it's because I used wiki links only and not concepts. So I'm actually going to make a much more denser graph. And it's going to be much more to process, and then I can see all the excerpts from my favorite books as a graph. So that's pretty amazing. And the way to visualize a folder is right-click on the folder, open an InfraNodus graph, and then you see this graph. So it's pretty cool and neat, and you can see the main ideas that you are taking the excerpts from all these books that I was reading, and also the main topics. I can see there's quite a lot about social systems, temporal creation, cultural patterns, perceptual existence, and so on. So as you can see, it kind of also, this is to answer the question of how to visualize folders, but I'm going to go more into it later. But that's what I wanted to show you, that I have a separate folder for also some external apps which integrate into Obsidian, like Readwise, which allows you to save excerpts from your book from Kindle. If you're reading books on Kindle, you can then import them into Readwise, and then it synchronizes with Obsidian. Let me answer some questions. So one question that we have, in which format can we export the interactive graph? So you have multiple formats available. Right now here in this Obsidian plugin, you only can copy some topics, and if you click here, you will just copy what you see. But if you click on extended view, you will actually copy also the underlying graph structure. If you go here on concepts, if you click on extended view again, you actually see dot graph structure, so the underlying structure inside. And then when you copy that, you could then feed it to any AI system, for example, ChatGPT, and then ask it to kind of take this structural information into account when thinking about a topic that you're exploring. But in the main version of InfraNodus, which is available here, I'm going to drag the window of InfraNodus into the screen so you can see the main screen. Let me just choose a project. So for example, here, I think you should be seeing the main version of InfraNodus now. So if you're in the main version of InfraNodus, you have the export button here, and then you can download it as a JSON, CSV, even in Gephi. So then if you want to visualize it in Gephi, you can do that. But that's in the main version of InfraNodus. Right now, for the extension, you can just copy paste the underlying graph structure. If you think it would be interesting to be able to export also in these more technical formats like JSON, CSV, and Gephi, let me know, and I'm going to add this as an option. The thing that you can do right now is if you're analyzing certain content, you can click this button. Up there, it only works for smaller text. So for example, you see this was a really huge one and it didn't work. But if we were analyzing this one, for instance, if it's just one page, you can actually copy this text into the main version of InfraNodus, and then you visualize it as a graph, the same thing, but in 2D, and then you export it as JSON or CSV. So that's also like a way how you could do that. Then Mikael is asking, would it be possible to have a multilingual version of InfraNodus in Obsidian? It seems to me that the plugin is no. It's not only available in English, it's available in 6 different languages. So you can actually use it with French, German, quite well, Russian, then some kind of beta support for Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Japanese, Chinese. So you can also use it with Norwegian, by the way. So yeah, you have multiple languages. The plugin at the moment will give you AI insights on the topic. So these topical names might be in English, but actually it can analyze information in any language. And the way to force it to analyze information in your language is to go into your main InfraNodus settings here. So you go to the apps page, and then you go to settings here, and you need to make sure your language is set to the language you want to analyze it in. So for example, now I'm analyzing in English, so that's why it will always process things in English. If I set it to German, then it's going to work really well for German. By default, it's an auto-detect, which works, but I always advise you, if you tend to use only one language, to set it to that language. Then it's going to appear here. And then when you use the plugin, because you are using the API key of your user account, it's going to know which language you prefer. So you will be able to set it to the language that you like to have. Then another question from Mikhail is, I'm talking less about the interface, more about classification of ideas. Yeah, so that I answered this question. Then another one is there a defined method for interpreting the graphs, like the distance and depth from the main node? Asks Joseph. Joseph, I'm going to talk about it in a second. Actually, I have a whole section on how to interpret the graph, so I'm going to talk about it. It's a really good question. Thank you. And Joseph also says that he uses Readwise as well, and he has it as his vault in Obsidian, which is great. I also really like using it. Then anonymous attendee is asking, is it possible to integrate these graphs or InfraNodus itself in another tool via API? So you can integrate the graph analysis via API. We have an API available, infranodus.com/API. You can learn more about it. You can use make.com automations that we have also to get the insights. If you would like to use the actual graph and integrate it somewhere, we're working on making it also available. It's going to take a month or two, and then you will be able to also use the graph. For example, if you want to add it into a dashboard or something like this, but you would need to use it in combination with your InfraNodus account, because it will only accept the data which is converted by InfraNodus, because there's quite a lot of underlying structural information like the gaps, the nodes, the names, and so on. Also the algorithm of processing. But in fact, if you like to hack things, you can already try to use it. I think it's just that we don't have a documentation for it, but theoretically you could embed it anywhere you want. So yeah, it's totally possible. Then we have more questions. Let's see, from Neil. Putting a note in a folder gives it a singular place to find it. On the other hand, InfraNodus can find it eventually through visualization. How do things like tag work in space of finding nodes with or without data view in Obsidian? So I'm going to show how I use tags to find nodes. Thank you for this question, Neil. And then Nasser Numan is asking, is there an API for InfraNodus? Yes. infranodus.com/API. Let me show you this page. So you can actually go here, API, and then you can go on the whole support portal, which is talking about like data structure, access points, how to get access to it. But you can also go, if you just want to read more about it, you go on the InfraNodus API page, and there you have some examples of automations and links to the documentation as well. So yes, there is definitely an API. But if you'd like to use API, please let me know what you would use it for. I'm always curious about use cases and how we can improve it. We're still working on it. So hope you find it useful. Then Paul is asking, how can you start with this very simple example, say an Obsidian node with a small amount of text and then move to a more complex example? Okay, I'm going to do that to show you how it works when I'm talking about the different ways to analyze nodes. And then Chuck McMurray is asking, have you used the tool to measure many transcripts from common content and conversations and analyze themes at a broad high level? Of course, it's one of the main use cases, actually. When you have transcripts from conversation, you can also filter it by the speaker. You can analyze with our graph extension, you can actually take a YouTube video, for instance, and then you can analyze the transcript of the video using YouTube. So reflection between for instance, you can just open it here and then it visualizes. Actually, in this case, it's comments, which is a new feature. So you can just open any video and analyze the comments for it to see what people are talking about when they talk about the video. But you can choose here to analyze the video, and then it gets the transcript. So for example, if you have an interview on YouTube, you can do that. And a quick hack for free is if you have a conversation that you recorded as an audio, you can just upload it as a private video to YouTube, and then it's going to transcribe it for you for free. And then you can use this extension to visualize this conversation. You will just need to make the video unlisted while you're analyzing it because it needs to be publicly available, but no one will be able to see it because it's a private link, which kind of looks like a password. So yeah, totally possible to do that. Okay, and then I think I answered all the questions. So let's move on with our program. And I'm going to talk more about the specific analysis workflows and how I'm analyzing nodes. And I'm going to take that feedback into account that you wanted to see how to do it with a simple node. So let me go back to InfraNodus Obsidian graph view, and I'm going to show you from a very small node. So for example, here I have my incoming folder. And let me find something very small here. For instance, here, I was just writing a note about alchemy. Philosopher's Stone is like singularity. The search of alchemists is like the search for artificial intelligence. Okay, so this idea of reaching singularity is like the new philosophical stone. Just an idea I had at some point, right? Maybe late in the night. I don't know. But in any case, this is a very small node. So this is a very good way to demonstrate how InfraNodus works. As you can see, let me just actually show you first the Obsidian graph view for this node. So alchemy, let me see, alchemy. Yeah, you see nothing because I didn't make the links. So yeah, it's not really useful in this case. Whereas InfraNodus automatically detects links between words that are in the same sentence. So in this case, philosopher is one node here, stone is another. It's connected because they're used in the same sentence, in the same context, and singularity is another. So this is one cluster. This is the cluster of the first statement. And this light blue is the cluster of the second statement. So search of alchemists is like the search. We come back for artificial, and then you see a link, intelligence. So that's the logic of InfraNodus. By the way, people confuse it often with vector embeddings, which is kind of similar conceptually, but you can think of vector embeddings as something that exists in multidimensional space, can be 1024 dimensions, incomprehensible for a human being. So if you were to project it on a three-dimensional space like we have here, you would maybe see something like this. But the problem is that the vector embeddings, they always take the general understanding of the model about the language into account. So for example, for a model, yes, maybe the words like artificial intelligence would be always next to each other, but alchemy and artificial intelligence would be far, far apart from each other. So you wouldn't see this connection. And that's why InfraNodus is so useful for analyzing local contexts, because it actually just takes co-occurrence into account, allows you to build a structure, and then you can use artificial intelligence on top to look for interesting connections. So that's the main difference. And I hope that explains, kind of using that simple node, it explains to you how that works. So I hope that makes sense. Also, by the way, please let me know if you're seeing stuff in the chat that I posted. Just maybe write something there, or in the Q&A section, just for me to make sure that you're seeing stuff, so we can have direct feedback in case you have any questions. And then let me just go further. Okay, thank you, Kevin. Very nice. You can see everything in the chat. Very good. So here we have a visualization of the node. To visualize the node, I just click on the node. I can right click on it, or if I use a Mac trackpad, I just double tap. Then I go open InfraNodus graph. It's going to open in the graph. You also have the button here, just in case. If you prefer to use that, you click that button on the node, it's going to be visualized. By the way, by default, if you just install InfraNodus, it's going to show up here. So you can just move it as a tab here into the sidebar, which you would need to open like this, and then it's going to be showing in your sidebar. So that's how you analyze a single node. And this is how I would start working on something. I would add some ideas. So for example, this idea of alchemy. And by the way, here already, this very simple visualization is pretty useful, because I see it's about alchemy and singularity philosophy. So I'm like, okay, these are the two high-level ideas I'm talking about. And obviously the gap between them is the connection between the two. And directly I can go and generate a question. And then the built-in AI will tell me, how can the quest for artificial intelligence akin to an alchemist search lead to a technological singularity that embodies the transformative power of the philosopher's stone? So it's kind of like a poetic question. And then I would then send it to chat. I would usually click go beyond the context, because this context is of this document and it's pretty small. I'm going to send it, and then it's going to use all its intelligence to come up with something nice, but still relevant to this document. So here it says that the technological singularity acts as a modern philosopher's stone, posed to redefine human capability and perception by merging intelligence with exponential innovation. So that could be the philosopher's stones, the exponent of how we can develop things, and maybe also the futility of this attempt, because as they didn't really find the philosopher's stones, maybe singularity is also unattainable. So, if you would like to kind of explore this idea philosophically, it's also a great tool to kind of get yourself to start thinking about this topic. So that's how I would do on the node. Then I have another node, which I would add. So for example, here it's some kind of imaginary art piece that I had, thinking about memes and truth, and how there is like a very short attention span these days. So people are not focusing too much on one thing. And it means they also don't accept a certain truth for too long. They are ready to shift their attention to something else and the implications of that. So that's kind of like the idea of that. And as you can see, by the way, when I click on each node, it's automatically visualized in the InfraNodus graph. It's a setting. So it's here. You can also switch it off. I think you can also make it that it only analyzes when you actually click the button. And then this is from a conversation I had with the Finnish friend, who was telling me that there's a concept in Finland, in Finnish language, called siso, which kind of means resilience. It doesn't really have an equivalent in English. It's kind of perseverance, like when you walk through a snowstorm and in the face of adversity, you're still moving through and moving on. So as you can see, it's kind of like really disjointed ideas. And what InfraNodus is great for is that it allows me to see how I can connect them together. Some of them are developed more, some of them are developed less. So let's say I want to analyze all of my incoming ideas. Then I'm going to right click on the folder, open an InfraNodus graph, and then I have the visualization of all the ideas. Okay. And then I can see the high level ideas first. So this is to return to the question of how you would analyze the graph, right? Like I have a folder of incoming ideas. Some of them are more developed, some of them are less developed. In fact, I would recommend to also split them into two parts, more developed is one part, less developed another part, but for the sake of brevity, we will just analyze them all at the same time. And I have a high-level representation of those ideas here, so I can see the main topics. I can see that the main topics are on temporal dynamics, and here it shows me which nodes: context, time, thing, AI, interaction, human. So kind of like, I get it. Okay, I understand what it's about. I can even ask it to show me in which context it's used. So here I'm talking about how humans are much better in understanding context than AI. So the more context you can provide before, the more systematic your approach is, the more time you're going to save. I think this is when I was writing some notes about using AI in software development. So as you can see, I'm remembering what those topics are about and what they relate to. And I'm like, okay, this is great because it's talking about like the length of the context. So the context in relation to time. Uh, yeah, it's all about the context and time and how long the context is. So this, I understand what this topic is about. Then another one is about cultural resilience. It's this idea of seesaw, perseverance, but also I was even talking about drugs and self-victimization. So that looks like a super interesting topic that I'm going to definitely zoom into further. And then biological connectivity is another topic. So here it's talking about planarian worms. It's an article, I think, from Ion Intelligence, a really nice blog that you're actually seeing right now on your screen. And it's just talking about how those worms, they can regenerate even if they're cut into parts. And there's this idea of how you can get inspired from this natural strategies for building resilient systems. So I'm reminding myself with those topics what are the main clusters of ideas. Imagine reading through this would be quite tiresome, but this allows me to get like a high level view, and already I have to start thinking of connections, right? And then life optimization. So I guess this, if I click on the context, it relates to, I remember it's about this idea of using AI in code development and also how it affects you as a person. So that's pretty interesting. Like you're optimizing something, but there are also some negative consequences because you expect it to produce results for you. You become lazy to think by yourself and so on. So this kind of like critical thoughts about AI. I'm remembering and reminding myself, and then attention economy, a whole cluster on that. And I think it relates to meme and truth culture, genetic coding, which is pretty interesting. Let's see what is about that. Okay, intelligence. So it's also about this idea of sequences and genes and how it's a certain language for saving ideas and maybe how we can get inspired from that. So there I already remind myself what I'm thinking about, and morality. Okay. And then what I can then do once I get this overview, what I usually like to do is to jump into a certain topic that I find relevant or interesting. Like I think here it was one on, a really crazy mix of perseverance, drugs, self-victimization, so on. So I would either zoom into a specific topic or I would go into specific concepts I see in the graph and explore it in more detail. And by exploring it in more detail, I would continue thinking about this idea, right? So if I'm in the mood of zooming in and developing a certain topic, I would do that. I would click on this, drugs, perseverance, self-victimization. I'm clicking on these nodes. I click on the context to see where it's used. And as you can see, InfraNodus automatically opens search for those topics in my whole bolt. And it's great because I see in which documents it's used. And then I can see that, okay, there's something about a statement here where I'm talking about drugs, perseverance, and so on. And then I jump into this topic, and then I can see what I've been writing about, why I was writing about. So CISO is related to the notion of drugs. We have to take drugs to have perseverance. Maybe it was from the conversation that I was having with my friend. Somehow we came to that conclusion. Maybe because it makes you stronger. I don't know. Definitely, if people take a lot of drugs, they're probably resilient in the short term. Of course, it's very bad in the long term. So that's maybe this idea of how you can build perseverance through adversity, and how we also have behaviors as human beings to kind of create the circumstances where we have to invoke this concept of CISO. So now I remember this, and as you can see, it allows me to reformulate it better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into the edit mode, and I'm going to actually save this idea. So I'll say that explore how human behaviors are actually a way for us to train perseverance and resilience. Even bad habits like drug consumption could be seen as a way of doing that. So as you can see, I will add an idea into the node, and then I'm going to go further, develop it into something. Usually I would also get rid of all those tags and kind of turn it into a proper text. And then I would turn it into an article and publish it. So that's if I decided to go into the idea. And here I would actually use the graph visualization of that very node to see how I can connect them better. So for example, I would click on gaps and see that there's a connection, or there's a gap between perseverance and capitalist ethics. So great, I'll just type in a question, and it's going to generate the question for me that I can use as a motivation to think what is the next sentence I should write from all these disjointed bits and pieces of ideas that were a result of maybe a drunken conversation. I don't know, right? But usually you can also have nice things coming out from this kind of conversations as well. And it's great to have tools to be able to actually then convert them into something logical and understandable, or to get rid of them if you find it's not interesting. So here it says, how does the Finnish concept of CISO, embodying perseverance and determination, influence consumer behavior in capitalist societies, potentially leading to self-victimization as a means to absolve responsibility and create perfect consumers driven by unfulfilled desires? So that's actually super interesting. A crazy link, but that's why I like it, because so I'm going to copy it. By the way, that's what I did. I copied it and pasted it here. And then I'm going to answer this question by saying that it's kind of like a note to myself, because I don't have time to formulate it well into a sentence now for the text that I'm going to be writing. But I'm going to say that I want to make a link between victimhood mentality and how it absolves us from responsibility, so eventually makes us less resilient, less sisu as a code word for it. But basically this is what I wanted to link it to kind of show that on the one side you have this bad behaviors that can be seen in a positive way if it's not too much of them, because you train perseverance, but at the same time, of course, if it's too much, then you destroy yourself, definitely. And then at the same time also all this all the people who get easily triggered, for instance, or who carry victimhood mentality, how it also reduces their resilience as well. And here I'm kind of connecting it. Are you ready to face this adversity? And I'm going to write it. Are you ready to face the adversity, or do you prefer to sit cozy at home? And I think there's another Finnish word for that also. So I'm going to write it later. And as you can see, then gradually it's going to turn into some kind of text. I'm going to, of course, rewrite it many times. And gradually it will become something that I will or will not feel ready to publish, depending on how crazy these ideas are. But I'm kind of a proponent of free speech here. You know, you just kind of think all kinds of things, and then you write all kinds of ideas down, inspired by conversations, some crazy ideas you have, and then you form it into something coherent and readable. Also using tools like this to connect your ideas together to see what are the topics that you could link better. And then once you have something finished, you can publish it, and it's at least it's a good provocation to start having conversations about this. Or maybe, you know, it's something that can help someone have a different perspective or see things in a different way. So that's how like I would work in developing this specific idea when I zoomed in onto a topic. But let me come back to this workflow, because that version or that branch of exploration was when I decided to zoom in on a specific topic of cultural resilience. If you remember, I'm rewinding now going back from the weave or from this deviation and then coming back to the original text. Just gonna quickly check if you have any questions so far. So someone is asking if it's possible to extract text from an image. Not yet, but definitely in the works. In the main version of InfraNodus, you will be able to do it very soon. But I have a hack for you. I think if you use, if you use a VS Code or Windsurf AI or Cursor AI, which are very famous software development tools, you can actually use their built-in AI to generate an image. So we also have an extension for those tools from InfraNodus. So what you can do is add an image. Let me just see if I have like some funny image that we could use. So I have a lot of desktops here, which I've been having. Okay, so for example, here it's an image of a building. So I can ask it interpret this image, put it in the chat mode. Then the built-in AI will hopefully create some sort of explanation of what this is about. It's quite a lot. Very nice description. And then I'm going to copy this text and then open a new page, visualize, paste it here. And then I will use the command inside, visualize as a graph. And then it's going to visualize the interpretation of this picture as a graph. So yes, you can do that, but not inside Obsidian because Obsidian doesn't interpret those images. But it's pretty cool. Like imagine uploading a bunch of images here and then having a graph that allows you to jump between those images. So for example, you could even give an instruction to Windsurf AI. Here you have an image, create a separate file for each image with a description. And then you put it in the write mode, you create a folder, and then you analyze the folder and you will be able to navigate your images using this visualization, which is pretty amazing. We will soon make it possible to do that also inside the main version of InfraNodus, but for now, you can use this highly advanced and complicated workflow to do that manually. And actually, to be honest, I think it's a pretty cool one. Even if it's harder, I mean, the flexibility you have here is crazy because you're using a coding tool to be able to do that. I mean, that's very next level. So I would recommend you to do that because an InfraNodus is probably going to have an easier interface that will be more understandable for people who are not familiar with tools like Obsidian or VS Code. John is asking, why are the answers from AI so brief? Is there a way to change it to become more elaborate? In fact, it's kind of like my personal preference because I don't want it to give me these huge bullet points like ChatGPT. The way to make it longer is to just generate it and then to go copy it and then go into ChatGPT and to paste it there, and then it will be very long. We might be adding a longer context window to the answer, so you will be able to get longer answers, but for that you need bigger interface. And the problem here, let me show you, is that a lot of people, for example, use this extension inside this very small window in the browser. And we're doing it also because it's not practical to have it too long. And I'm kind of like a big proponent of not using AI to think for me, but to kind of interact with it, human in the loop approach. So that's why short answers, short questions, we think together. When I have ideas, I write them down and we move on. So maybe that explains the ideological reasoning behind it. And then Nasser is saying, I want to ask if InfraNodus is secure and how we can implement it within our enterprise domain, ensuring that data remains within the enterprise environment. Is a secure enterprise-focused version of InfraNodus available that meets this criterion? So by default, when you're using this extension, it doesn't save any data on the servers. It's operating in so-called private mode where it just sends data to process, sends it back. There's not even a cache of this data left on the server. So yeah, nothing is saved. If you use the main version, of course, you can have an option to save it here, right? Like you have graphs and you can save stuff in your graphs. and then they're stored on the server in Ireland and EU. We're a French company, so very strict data protection laws. Obviously, we're not selling your data, not using it for anything. It's just for you to be able to access them. If you want, you can even just make a graph and then erase it, and then there's no trace on it of it. So it's very safe, but because it's not open source, you have to take our word for it, obviously. But that's what most companies do. They just have terms and conditions where they describe how it works, and most of the time you have to trust that they're not lying. And obviously for us, we understand that we're working with very sensitive data, so everything is very well protected. But if your enterprise has some specific data protection policies, we have to discuss it with the sales team, because there are some procedures that you sometimes have to go through, which are quite expensive, and that then depends on the project that you have. But in most cases, I mean, you could just use it as an extension and trust that it's not going to save anything. If you need some kind of verified procedure, we can discuss it, and then it can be adapted to the needs of your organization. Then Neil is asking, do you have a way of going back to those added new ideas? So, Neil, I don't quite understand which sense you mean, but I think you're touching on something really interesting, because so now I just added 2 ideas into this document, right? Actually, I don't understand why they're not there. It's actually pretty cool, because they seem like they're lost, and that's a great use case for us to test if I'm actually going to find them or not. So what I usually like to do is, because Obsidian doesn't have a version control, that's why I'm using Windsurf AI. And I will usually go into the incoming folder. And then because I use version control here, I will be able to see if there were any changes, right? And so, for example, here, I can see all the changes that I added. And that's why I actually prefer to use VS Code or Windsurf AI, not Obsidian, because I get to stuff like that. In Obsidian, I think you can see the history of a node, but you don't really have a built-in Git control. If you don't know what Git is, it's what all the software developers use when they write code, because you always experience this problem that you kind of have to find what were the additions that you made to the nodes, and what did the other programmers add. So you have this very strict version control where you can basically always see what was added into the system. And then you can always go back and see that, okay, so for example, you added those files, magnet, medium, perturbation, network structure, and in that file, you added those ideas inside, right? So you can clearly see what you added, where those files are. And that's pretty amazing, because on top of the ability to always keep track of what you added, and you see it highlights it here, so I know I added it on this session, I can then commit this, and then it will be saved. Or what I can also do inside VS Code and extension is that I can right click on this file and ask InfraNodus to only visualize the difference, which is pretty amazing. So I don't visualize the whole text, but just what I added. And I can also do that for my whole repo or whole folder. So let's say I've been working on this folder for a while, added some ideas inside, and then gradually I can, visualize all the new ideas that I added. I'm actually going to do that now. I'm going to go back into the CISO file. I don't know, for some reason there was another file with the same information, so I'm just going to paste this stuff into the correct file. As you can see, Obsidian had a little glitch, which is not nice, and it added ideas in the wrong place. But in any case, now I have them in the right place. I hope it's going to be saved. And when I go back to version control for this, I see it highlighted, incoming, CISO, boom. I have these ideas here, so I can go back to them. And as you will see, I can then visualize it for several different files. So that's how it would work. I hope that answers the question. Then Paul is asking, I use the app Text Sniper to extract text from images and screens. Oh, that's a great tip. I'm gonna write it down.
into my tools. So I'll make a new node and I'm gonna say image processing and I'm gonna paste this app and I'm gonna check it out. Thank you for the tip, Paul. So if you extract text, then yeah, you could just paste it into InfraNodus and then have it visualized after as a graph. So that's how it would work. Text Sniper. Then Kevin is saying, which Windsurf subscription, Pro Ultimate, is best for integrating with InfraNodus and its IDE plugin, considering writing, support, managing, settle custom nodes, fleeting ideas, and thought organization. So in fact, you could even use the free version because it's just a question of how much prompts they give you. But as you can see, I only used one so far. I actually don't need any prompting because you have AI already kind of like on the basic level, you have a representation of ideas inside InfraNodus. We will soon build in AI, but the way that it works now is, let's say I added this concept, I make a question based on that. So for example, I identified the gap in what I just added. That was this like additional text that I added into CISO, COSI, resilience, desire, creation. Very unlikely topics, but that's why it's great. I click on question, and what happens is that it says here, it copied AI prompt with the graph structure to clipboard, and then I can go to Cascade, which is the native AI of Windsurf, and I paste it here, and then it's going to generate a research question for me based on this idea. By the way, now I think it's going to be even trying to change my text because I'm in the right mode. So you need to make sure you're in the chat mode. So you could do that. I also like this extension called Continue, which also allows you to run a local llama model. I'm not sure if I'm running it actually right now. Let me just make sure I am. Llama. Okay, it doesn't find the llama. Llama? No. Okay. Well, in any case, you could just also use Claude 3.5 from Anthropic, paste this thing that was generated by InfraNodus, and then you see it generates a question for you. How does the societal shift from Sisoko to Lee? So it actually found this concept that I was talking about, reflect changing consumer patterns. So as you can see, you don't need a subscription here. You could just use a local model or your Anthropic API key. So whatever you see fit. But usually on Pro subscription, you really find it. It's only $10 a month, and I even made a tweet about it that it's like I I have no words. I think I'm the happiest person paying this €10 a month for this amazing tool, Windsurf. Like I highly recommend it. So yeah, Pro is enough. Only this month I went over it and I just purchased additional €10 of subscription. But you probably don't need Ultimate. Like it's only if you're really a heavy user inside organization and so on. So I hope that makes sense. Joseph is saying I have voice notes AI and it analyzes images. Haven't used it myself. Great. Thank you for the tip. I'm adding it into my image processing node. Great. And then Rosa is saying, Paul and Joseph, thanks. I was thinking of some embedded screenshots or attachment with Obsidian nodes, so the graph is more complete. That's true. That's very nice. So you kind of like analyze nodes at the same time. Maybe there is an extension for Obsidian that does that. So it adds the analysis of the images, and then you have also those nodes inside. And then another question, does InfraNodus work on private YouTube videos? I know Notebook LM has that limitation that videos must be public. No, you have to make a video unlisted and then it will work. Like it has to be accessible from the outside because YouTube doesn't allow you access to videos. It's crazy, but yeah, even if the video maker says I'm happy for it to be used because it's on the Creative Commons license, YouTube is not going to allow you that. So there are all kinds of crazy ways to try to get those videos, but they have to be public or unlisted. Unlisted means it's only available with the link, so it's almost as good as private. You just post it and then hope that no one can guess the link while you're analyzing it, and then you can make it private again. So you just make it unlisted while you're analyzing it, and then back to private if you don't want anyone to see it. So now that I answered the questions, let's go back to the research workflow. So here, as I told you, I looked at the main topics. I zoomed into a specific topic that I found interesting. And by the way, just to let you know, we will go on for another 15 minutes or so, and there's going to be a lot of really condensed content in this time. So bear with me, so to say. And then when we're done, I will go into some bonus track content that you don't have to watch because this webinar is also streamed, so you'll be able to watch it later. But the advantage of watching it now is that you can ask me questions directly as we go. And so, and also even try it directly in your Obsidian, for instance, while we're doing that. So now that we're exploring the workflow, I showed you how you add nodes into the incoming folder, how you analyze a specific node or the whole folder with the right click. Then how I read the graph by looking through it, looking at the main topics, then zooming into specific topics like I do here. So for example, I visualize the whole folder and then I find some topic interesting here, and then I can zoom in and explore it in more detail. By the way, the topics change now because I added more content into the Sisu node, so that's why they're a little bit different. And then the next thing that I do, so once I analyze things, kind of an overview, zooming into the concept, I zoom out again, and then I go into the gaps folder. And then I look into the gaps between things, which I showed you already. So you basically, it finds the clusters of ideas that are not well connected, and then it proposes me to think of a connection between them. Global CISO, attention, trade. So that's great, like trading attention and resilience, totally unconnected topics because they're from two different nodes that I made at a different time. But I'm going to click question, and then the built-in AI in InfraNodus, which you don't need any keys for, it's already included in the subscription, will generate a question for you. How can the temporary belief in meme truths and the concept of finished CISO be harnessed to enhance global resilience and adaptivity, similar to how grasses thrive through diverse environments? So it really took all the ideas from these incoming notes and tried to come up with something that would connect them together, which is really amazing. Let me just copy this here. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to send it to chat and I will say go beyond this context because I want it to be a little bit crazier in how it responds. And let's see what it generates. So it's going to come up with an answer. Temporary belief and meme truth, like the adaptability of finished CISO, can foster resilience by encouraging flexibility and perseverance. These traits mirror nature's grasses, thriving by bending but not breaking under diverse conditions, offering valuable lessons for global adaptability, which is pretty cool. But I will show you now how you can go even further. So I'm going to copy this note because I actually like this answer, but I want to develop it further. And by the way, if I copy it, I can either add it into my notes here, or I can also export it into a special folder in InfraNodus, which is called from Obsidian plugin. I can set the name in the settings. And I'm saving here all the best ideas that I'm generating from the plugin. And as you can see here, I have stuff that are from like months ago. So as I'm gathering insights, I'm building another graph, like a meta graph of my insights on top, which is pretty amazing. I really recommend you to use it because gradually you will come up with all kinds of crazy stuff, interesting stuff, useful stuff, and then you will have a graph that will show you how they all connect to one another and that you can use the same approach on. So it's like ideating in a meta way on top of the ideation. But here I want to show you what you can also do. So for example, here, let's say I like this node, I save it, but I have also a feature here that's called meta prompting. So I can copy this here, a statement that AI generated. I click this button and then I say, I can actually choose how it should process it. So I can say, check if it's true, generate an interesting question. But what I would like it to do is to think of a connection to memes of the statement. So I'm kind of doing a meta prompt on top of a prompt, and then I send it. And here, as you can see, it adds this kind of meta prompt on top of this chat. And here it says memes like CISO act as viral carriers of resilience concepts. They quickly spread, reinforcing adaptability mindset. So it's great because it makes me think of these worms and of the concept of adaptability and this term that I forgot, but that where they are split, that they connect again, right? So It's this idea they quickly spread, reinforcing adaptability mindset, akin to how grasses propagate through seeds dispersed by the wind. This propagation aids in cultural adaptation and collective global resilience because they kind of help the culture mutate or retain maybe some aspects of the current zeitgeist, what's happening at the moment, and to kind of enshrine them into the history, into the media that we create and store and so on. So it's pretty interesting. I'm going to add this into my text on memes, actually. And even though it's almost like a finished text, in fact, I'm going to, maybe I don't have to talk about Sisu here, but I'm definitely going to talk about the positive aspects of memes, that they increase resilience by creating this kind of cultural pockets, so to say, and therefore enabling more different perspectives, something like that, right? So I'm going to add this, and then I'm going to go back to the gaps page, and then I'm going to find another gap. So for example, here, attention, trade, and perseverance science. That's kind of already what we talked about. Let's find something else. Genetic code and attention trade. That's interesting. Generate a research question again. So as you can see, once again, I'm focusing on the gap. Generate a question. Read the question. How do meme truth, driven by collective belief and rapid trade, compared to genetic coding in influencing momentary shifts in societal attention and evolutionary mutations, and what role does intelligence play in navigating these transient dynamics? I mean, great. I love this question. I'm going to save it into my text on memes because I've been kind of negative when I was writing about them, but these are kind of positive ways to think about memes also, that they increase adaptability, that they also might affect evolution in an interesting way. And it does that because I was writing about this in another text here, how you can actually, like, strange ideas, they might be actually good for society because they enable us to create different versions of life. And so to me, that's pretty interesting, actually, that it reminded me myself that I can also think positively about them because of that. So this is how I would do this. I would analyze the topics, then gaps, and then you also have trends analysis, which kind of shows which topic is trending towards the end of the text. But I would do it normally for when I'm in a specific document, because here I'm analyzing the whole folder, and this order is not chronological. So this works well if you have a document and you want to see what other topics that appear towards the end, for instance, and so on. So that's how I would do this analysis. Write some ideas, consolidate them into different folders, into different texts, adding those ideas in. I use VS Code to see what are the changes that I created. So as you can see here, I added something to meme truth and to CISO, right? And once I do that, what I can do, if I was inside VS Code, not Obsidian, I could right click, visualize diff, so only the stuff I added as a graph. And then, as you will see, I will have like a summary of the ideas that I added so far. And I see there's something on cultural resilience, obviously, behavioral influence, evolutionary shifts, and finish CISO. So it's this link between evolution, resilience, adaptability, and memes and cultural viruses. And that's great because I wanted to write about those two topics, and now I see how they can be connected. So these articles that I'm writing about, they will link to each other. And also, if it was just a nice topic for a conversation, that's great because what I thought was two separate ideas. One was about memes and how bad they are because of short attention span and so on. And another one, this concept of CISO resilience and how you have to push yourself sometimes. Like, in fact, they're connected, and it turns out it was all linked all this time. And this is exactly what it allowed me to see. By the way, I would never be able to do that using the standard Obsidian tools, because the graph would never show me any connections because I didn't highlight any words. And even if I did highlight them, how would I link, for example, this idea of Sisu to memes? Like, there would be no way to do that. But This graph, because it uses plain language and because it uses this granular level of concepts and the built-in AI on top that interprets these connections, works much better. This is why it's so useful, and this is why it can be used very well for thinking. In this example, by the way, I was using it for just some ideas that I have for writing, but I could as well use it for business ideas. I actually have a whole folder here on some business ideas I'm having. So I'm just going to show you real quick how you would do that for this, because some people might say, oh, this is just for developing strange ideas, writing, but what's the real life scenario? Sometimes there is feedback like this, which I find strange because thinking about ideas is also real life. Having conversations is also real life. But let's get as real as we can and go into how we can actually build new businesses from it. So that's as practical as you can get, a quick money-making scheme 101. So we choose all the business ideas we have. I have a lot of them, as you can see, sharing them with you because I think that genius is 99% hard work, 1% of ideas, as the famous person said. So it doesn't matter if anyone wants to do the same. And then I will right-click, open an InfraNodus graph, visualize it. So I have all my business ideas here. And now I'll show you something. In the description of my business ideas, I use the word thing and kind a lot because I was kind of thinking about things. So I can select those words, hide them from the graph by clicking this button. Now I'm going to click this button to see all the nodes. And so I have a cleaner structure now. And what I can do, a super lazy way of doing it. I'm like, okay, let's just generate a business idea directly from all these ideas. So I'm just going to click here and it's going to analyze the whole graph structure and come up with an idea. So here it's telling me that it's a blend of media creation tools and accountability systems, possibly leveraging blockchain for transparency. The goal is to facilitate content creation, sharing, and mutual support, all while incorporating an engaging workflow and keyword analysis. So that could be already like a pretty good business idea, in fact, to have a accountability system that's running on blockchain, and that also like maybe it's a content creation system where you make yourself a content plan and you create some sort of accountability system on blockchain that if you post things regularly, you get rewarded somehow and everyone supports each other in this endeavor. So I could copy this to clipboard, then I could go into Windsurf AI and basically say like, okay, I have an idea for an app. Tell me how it could be developed. And this is why this Windsurf AI app is so amazing, because it will come up with an idea and it will make a whole structure for you of the actual app that would be able to do that. It's crazy how useful it is. And I will make another video on actually using this system. You see, it's creating a whole structure for the app already, like the whole workflow management, MVP. You can now tell it, okay, launch this app and you will have an app from this idea. Now, of course, I did it very quickly because I don't want to bore you with details, but imagine if I took a little bit more time, like 5 minutes more to regenerate all these ideas to come up with some interesting stuff. I mean, you never know what we would come up with. And most importantly, I could focus on a specific topic. For instance, here, workflow management. So all the business ideas that relate to workflow, then generate an idea for that. Gamified workflow that guides users through steps with accountability features. Okay, so it's kind of like this idea of sharing workflows that I had. Again, another business idea, boom, you build it there. So imagine instead of kind of having those ideas accumulate here and staying there for a very long time for nothing, you now have a possibility to quickly have a visual overview of how they all connect, find some commonalities or gaps depending on how critical you are of yourself. Maybe you want to focus on the gaps between these ideas, and this is where you think is a good idea, or maybe you're more focused on a specific topic that you find interesting and relevant. And then you focus on that topic, and then you start developing this as an app. So that can also be very practical, where you can think about business ideas this way. And this is how I would also say that this is like a very important feature also of how I use Obsidian, because in this case, in the case before where it was concerned writing new text, I was just writing and creating new articles here, right? So I'm kind of like developing a text. In this case, where I'm analyzing business ideas, in fact, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to somewhere like Jira and say, okay, I give myself a task, create an MVP for this blockchain accountability app. So, and then I will split this task into a few more, and then I already have a sprint project ready. So I always try to bring it to some concrete results. If it's about writing text, I'm going to try to have a finished article. If it's about product ideas, I'm going to make Jira or Trello Kanban board to doing done and kind of like plan how I'm going to develop what I like. And if it's just something that I'm doing for fun, I'm gonna try to keep this idea, and then next time I meet someone, I'm gonna have a conversation with them about it. Like this strange connection of memes and resilience of culture. So these are some practical examples for how I would do it, and that's why I'm kind of liking to do it this way, because it allows me to develop them into something concrete. Use Jira as much as possible, or any task tracking software, because then you can set epics for them, time limitations, and then all those ideas can become something concrete. And by the way, what I found is a very good approach is once I add some of those ideas in. So for example, here it generated for me like a whole MVP plan of this app. I'm going to copy this, make a new note in my business ideas here, right? So I think it's here, research, business ideas. I can have to do, right? And then I can add a whole thing, like this whole text here. And then I'm going to convert it into Jira tickets. I'm sure you can even have an AI do that for you, but I would do it myself normally. And then what's really cool is that once I finish doing that, I can always go to the Git control and make a commit. So that means I save those changes as like an iteration, and then I can review it back in a month, for example, and see how well I'm progressing on these tasks. So that's why version control is so useful. I'm going to make another video on how to apply it to your thinking or product development process later. Inspired from coding, but using it for everyday life. Let me just answer a few questions. So Chuck is saying, is there a way to integrate a live transcription and translation tool such as Otter AI with InfraNodus workflow? Could allow for near real-time analysis and visualization of the connections and insights emerging from live conversations, interviews, broadcasts. Yes, through the extension. In fact, you have an app inside. I'm not sure if it's Otter or another app. I'm going to post it in the comments to this video later on YouTube when I find it. But basically, as I'm talking right now, it automatically transcribes, and then I could just use the extension on top of it of InfraNodus. And so each time it refreshes, it would also refresh the window. And this is how it would work. I think it could also be possible to do something like this in ChatGPT or in any other voice recognition tool. So you would basically find an app that has transcription in the browser window live, and then you would use the extension on it and reload it and have direct feedback. So this is how you would do that with the app. So let me see some other question. How can the Obsidian Vault be linked to VS Code Windsurf to show up for version control? Good question. So inside the Windsurf, you actually open a folder. You will just open your Obsidian folder, but you have to activate Git there. And you do that by going to source control and by running the commands there. If you don't know how to do it, you just go to the built-in AI inside Windsurf or VS Code. They also have Cursor AI plugin, or you can use the GitHub Copilot, and you just ask it how to implement version control. And here you have terminal window directly, which you can open here. And it's just going to tell you exactly the steps you need to do and the commands you need to run to activate it. So That's how you would do that. Just use the built-in AI into the tool to learn about how it works. Or if you know it already, you just open the folder, go to source control, and activate it there. Mikhail is asking, some of us rely more on linked nodes than files. In this context, would it be possible to link InfraNodus to data view tables to view the context of several nodes at the same time? So I'm not so familiar exactly with data view tables, but if you send me some examples by email, which I'm going to write in the chat right now, I will be happy to show you what I would do with them. So please send me some examples, and then I can record a little video for you. In the same vein, does the transduction of nodes work with the plugin, extracting the text from nodes that have wiki links of that special type? So it's some kind of special syntax that people use. Again, I have to see the syntax. I think I'm familiar with that, and I made it work also with that. But you have to send me maybe an example of how those nodes look so I can send you some information. Then you mentioned using the extensions with bookmarks. Can you demo it? Yeah, great question. Thank you for the reminder. So bookmarks. Okay, let's go back to Obsidian. And bookmarks is a special way that you could say, all right, like some ideas, I want to bookmark them. And so you create a kind of like a temporary folder for them. So for example, let's say I want to analyze let's say imaginary art piece is going to be one bookmark. So I double click and then I say bookmark, and then I create a new bookmark called art. And it's going to be, it's just that, art. And then I go into art folder, so a completely different folder. And then let's see if I have like some note about an art idea, bookmark. And this is also gonna be art. Okay. And maybe another note, a sculpture I had an idea for. And we will save this. Okay, so this already is a bookmark. So maybe let's see another one, flow. I'm not sure if I'm adding bookmarks correctly because I'm not using them that much. But then when I go to bookmarks here, yeah, so for some reason it's saving it into the wrong group. So I think what I should do is that you actually create a new group here, art. Okay, and then you save these notes into this group. Sorry for this. I was not using them for a while, so I forgot how to use them. So let's rewind. I go back to the art idea I had. Where is this? Imaginary art piece, bookmark. Now I add it into this bookmark group, and I leave the title as it is, so I remember which node it is, right? So I save it, then I go into this one, add bookmark into that bookmark group, so it's like a temporary folder, art, and then sculpture, add bookmark, or edit bookmark, but now it's gonna go to art, not InfraNodus. And then I go to bookmarks. I have the whole folder. These are the 3 notes that I added with this bookmark. And what it does is that it allows me to then select this bookmark. By the way, now it doesn't show the contextual menu, but perhaps I can select them all at the same time. No, it used to work. I'm sorry, but there should be a right-click menu here that appears. Maybe I'm missing something why they're not being analyzed. Perhaps if I click like this, no. Yeah, there should be a right-click menu here, and you would be able to analyze them like this. I'm gonna look into it and roll it out with the new update or explain how it works. But basically, it would work something like this, like you have here in the search results. So for example, if I'm searching on art, I have these results, and then I can click here, and then it says visualize search snippets within InfraNodus graph or all the pages that were found. So I can say, okay, just visualize the search snippets that contain the word art. And then it's going to take the search snippets and visualize them as a graph. So it's pretty powerful because it allows you to have different perspectives into your vault. Like I want to see all the statements where I'm talking about art. So for example, here, part start, let's get rid of this, see what else is there. And then I see, okay, I'm talking about system of perception, article. I click here to see all the nodes, hypertension, even some health stuff, patient heart measures, so some artwork about measuring. You see, so I can do it like this. And if I want to use tags, I would do this. And then exactly in the same way, I would then say crypto. I could analyze things by tags. Maybe bookmark. No. Okay. So basically here you will be able to do the same. Just right click and analyze it with the graph. I'm going to check why it's not there, but this is how you would do that. So I hope that explains it. Let me know if you have any other questions because we are going to end soon. I will, in the meanwhile, look through if I talked about everything I wanted to mention. So we talked about how you analyze a graph, diving into the different topics, gaps, understanding trends, adding new content into existing content. VS Code, I demonstrated to you how to use the VS Code of Windsurf AI, which I highly recommend, and I'm going to make another video on this using version control. And I think we're almost over. Let's read through the questions. So there's one, can you do a video? Kevin is saying, can you do a video where you just record your entire writing workflow, then show the moments? I mean, almost every video on YouTube is kind of that. But I have to keep them short because otherwise they get kind of downgraded by the YouTube algorithm, because if you record a really long video, people have attention span of 2 minutes, so it thinks it's not interesting. But some people do watch them until the end. So that's why I never record those really long form ones. But especially for you, Kevin, I'm going to do one. I'm just gonna keep the camera rolling and I'm just gonna like go through writing an article maybe on this meme, so resilience, and just show you how I go from having those notes to actually having the final result. And you want for the Windsurf. Okay, so I'm gonna do this inside Windsurf because probably that's what I'm going to be using. I mean, I like the editor a bit more in Windsurf, in Obsidian, because it's kind of looks nicer. But I'll probably use Windsurf because I like this version control. So yeah, I'm going to do a long video on that. And then Mikael is saying explanation of the second question. Obsidian allows embedding content from one node into another using the node syntax. This feature is called transclusion. The question is whether InfraNodus can recognize and analyze the transcluded content as part of the current node. Essentially, you want to know if the plugin treats embedded content as part of the node. So by default, it doesn't understand this syntax. I mean, because you have this double brackets, even if you have the explanation mark, it's going to detect it as a connection. But I have to, again, like I said, I have to get a node from you, or like a collection of nodes, maybe 5 or something, that link to each other in this way. And maybe you explain to me what the expected behavior would be. And then we can run InfraNodus on them, and you tell me if it looks like what you would like it to be or not, and then we can take it from there. So that's how we could work on that. I hope that makes sense. So please send me an email. I left it in the chat and we can talk about it. And then here, Mikael is explaining the question, so how people actually work in data view, explaining how that works. Right, so let me actually save this question into my InfraNodus folder here. And I will save it into the incoming webinar. And I'm gonna make sure that we follow up on this later, on this specific syntax. But again, I please ask you to send me some examples because I don't use this syntax and I need to have a real example to be able to see how it should work. So I hope you can do that. By the way, I have another poll in the meanwhile that I wanted to ask you to answer. So let me just run it really quickly. This one, which tools you actually use. So what you use Obsidian for, and also which other tools you use. So if you could please answer this while I'm answering the questions, that would be super nice. And then I'm going to read through the questions, and you should be seeing the poll right now on your screen, so you can answer this poll in your Zoom, so we can understand a little bit better what people use Obsidian for, and also if they use other tools and which are the other tools that they use. And I will share the results later. And these are only for those who stayed through this 1 hour and almost 40 minutes. So it's the people who really stayed a very long time. So this is like power users, I think, of knowledge tools, which is great. We will have a good sample here. Yes, Michaela, I think it's better if you send me an email on that topic, but with the examples. I think that will make a lot of sense. Then we can really try it out. And Kevin is saying for the longer workflow video, please do as you do, go back and forth, which is the workflow I think I will use, Obsidian to Windsurf, back to Obsidian. I want to see the real workflow and use. And thank you for all you do. Thank you, Kevin, for this amazing idea. I will definitely do it. Maybe not directly, but like in the next couple of weeks, perhaps, because I actually want to finish this article, so it's going to be great. I'm just going to start the camera, record the screen, and maybe I'm going to post it on the other channel that we have, because this channel that I'm using right now for streaming, it's a channel that has more views now, and YouTube works in a way that if you post something that people don't watch, it might start thinking it's not interesting content. So I made another channel for this kind of very specific content on InfraNodus. I sent the link in the chat, so you can subscribe to this channel, and like this, you will be able to see this video when it's ready. And by the way, I encourage you to subscribe to this other channel, because it's going to have much more specific content to InfraNodus and how to use it. Because on the Nodus Labs channel, I'm just talking about AI things in general to make it accessible to the people who are also not using InfraNodus as well. And Joseph is saying that he's using Todoist. I guess that's for the list of tasks, actually, from Obsidian thinking process. So that's actually pretty cool. Let me write it down into my tools notes. So that would be task management. And I always love to learn what other tools people use, especially those people who use InfraNodus, because I always learn from you guys so much. Like I really appreciate when you send me some stuff that you find, some nice tools that you use. So please, if you find something you like, just send me an email. I always read them, always try everything. And so that's great. And now I'm going to share the results of the poll. So if you didn't answer the poll, please take a few seconds to answer, because I see some people haven't answered yet. I will just read through the results. So people are saying that what they use Obsidian for is mainly taking personal notes. Second place is work-related stuff. And third place is writing and character development. So you see like a lot of writers, and then playing around and other, but mainly taking personal notes and work-related stuff. So that's great. It's kind of like how I use it also. And then it sometimes turns into work, sometimes it doesn't. And in terms of the other tools that people use regularly, Google Docs, Notion, Logseq, other. If you have some recommendation for us, please leave it in the Q&A or in the chat. And then Rome Research, Logs, yeah. So basically, Google Docs is another tool. And yeah, I also sometimes use Google Docs as well. I think I will build an extension for Google Docs as well, because in fact, the browser extension used to work on Google Docs, but they did something to ban its use, so you cannot do this nice thing anymore. What you can do, though, is you can select the text on a page. So if you're in Google Doc, you select it, copy, then you go here in the extension, add content, and then you just add the content manually, and then it's just going to visualize what you added. So you can actually use InfraNodus on your Google Docs the same way, just copy and paste the data from your page, and then you will be analyzing that page. So you just copy, then go to the editor here, add content, paste, make sure that you're not appending it to the currently analyzed one, then click Save, Visualize, and so on. So yeah, that's a way to use it. And I'm going to share the results of the poll now so you can also see them on your screen and analyze them yourself. Yeah, well, I think that we covered almost all the topics, actually all the topics that I wanted to cover. So I thank you for staying with me for such a long time. It was great. Also, thank you for the amazing questions that you had. Super happy to talk about it. If you would like to explore some topics in more detail, please let me know. We can talk about them in the next webinars. I think I'm going to make one soon on using VS Code and version control system. I'm also gonna send the link to this video that is being now live on YouTube, so you can share it with your friends. It's in the chat right now. And if you would like to rewatch some parts of the workflow, send it to some people you know you work with, or just to post it online on social media, please feel free to do that. And also we can use the comments to this video to talk about the different specific workflows in more detail as well, so that we keep everything in one place. And yes, I thank you for being with me. I hope you found it useful. And I will post a new video as I always do on Saturday. I think it's going to be on VS Code workflow, Windsurf AI, VS Code, Cursor AI. I'm going to make a video on that. And then if you would like to learn more about how it works, you will be able to see that. And as I promised Kevin, I'm gonna also post more of this long format recordings on the other channel, InfraNodus, which I also posted in the chat. So thank you very much for staying with me. Let me know about your use cases. Send me examples of your Obsidian vaults if you would like to get some specific kind of processing. And also, if you have any ideas for how it should work, let me know, please. I will be happy to talk about it with you. Also, if you find any bugs, let me know, because all this is work in progress. And with your feedback, we can make it better and more useful for you. So thank you very much. I wish you a great day, and it was a pleasure. And we see each other soon. Thank you very much. You will receive also an email with a request to leave some feedback about this webinar. So please feel free to write how you feel about it, what you liked, what you didn't like. Also leave any critical comments you have, or if you enjoyed something, also let me know so I can improve for the next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.